Die kenne ich nicht. Ups.
For years, fans and the media loved to believe that two of pop's brightest stars, Mariah Carey and Jennifer Lopez, shared a bond of mutual respect, perhaps even friendship. After all, they were both queens of their eras. Mariah, the vocal powerhouse who dominated the 90s with 5-octave runs, and Jennifer, the triple threat who stormed into music after conquering Hollywood with Selena in 1997. To outsiders, it seemed inevitable that these two women would stand side by side, representing the ultimate image of diva sisterhood. But the truth was far more complicated. Their paths crossed in boardrooms and backstage corridors, rarely in public smiles or shared interviews. And when asked about Jennifer Lopez in 2001, Mariah Carey delivered a line that became pop culture canon. "I don't know her." Those 4 words didn't just hint at distance, they detonated the illusion. What looked like a glittering friendship between two global icons was, in reality, an absence dressed up by Hollywood's narrative machine. Beneath the glamour, there were whispers of rivalry, industry manipulation, and a silence that spoke louder than any duet ever could. So we have to ask, was this friendship ever real, or just another carefully packaged Hollywood act? When Jennifer Lopez first appeared on the screen as Selena in 1997, she instantly became a household name. Critics praised her portrayal of the late Tejano superstar, and audiences saw her not just as an actress, but as a rising Latina role model. That same year, Mariah Carey was celebrating the success of her 6th studio album Butterfly, which critics hailed as her artistic breakthrough, blending hip-hop collaborations with her signature ballads. In the late 90s, both women were in the headlines for different reasons. But media narratives quickly began placing them side by side, framing them as parallel forces in pop culture. By 1999, Lopez had released her debut album On the Six. To the surprise of many in the music industry, it was a commercial success, propelled by singles like If You Had My Love, which hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Meanwhile, Mariah had already secured her place as one of the best-selling female artists of the decade, earning Billboard's Artist of the Decade award that same year. For publicists and magazines, the story practically wrote itself. 2 glamorous women of color, dominating music and film, each representing different flavors of the same diva archetype. This illusion of closeness was largely crafted through media juxtaposition rather than real interaction. When Lopez appeared on red carpets in glittering gowns, photographers often mentioned Mariah in the same breath. Headlines read like deliberate pairings, "The Next Mariah," or "Diva Rivalry Brewing." Yet in glossy magazine spreads, the tone was softer, suggesting that both women admired each other from afar. 2 queens sharing the throne of late 90s pop. Behind the scenes, PR machinery leaned heavily on the image of female camaraderie. Stylists booked them into similar fashion spreads. Lopez, in her iconic green Versace dress at the 2000 Grammys. Mariah in equally daring ensembles at the MTV VMAs. Talk shows fueled the narrative by asking one about the other, trying to tease out sound bites that could be framed as friendly acknowledgement. Hollywood thrives on doubles, and the pairing of Lopez and Carey became a profitable illusion. What further cemented this perception was the idea of a diva sisterhood. At the dawn of the new millennium, pop was defined not only by male boy bands like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, but by female megastars. Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Whitney Houston, Celine Dion, and of course, Mariah and Jennifer. Within that ecosystem, the public expected alliances, duets, or at the very least, mutual admiration. Instead, what they got was distance. But at the time, that distance was easy to overlook, precisely because the media kept filling in the gaps. Data. Anchors help reveal the precision of this illusion. In 1999, Billboard crowned Mariah Carey as the Artist of the Decade, a recognition of her unparalleled dominance on the charts, with 15 number 1 hits throughout the 90s. That same year, Jennifer Lopez's first single debuted at #1 on the Hot 100, a feat that placed her in direct comparison with established legends. Magazine headlines from 2000, like Entertainment Weekly's Jenny's Got the Beat, directly asked whether Lopez could challenge Mariah's reign. The juxtaposition was irresistible, the established diva and the rising star framed as peers. On red carpets, photographers often shouted their names in the same breath. At awards shows, when one performed, the camera would cut to the other for reaction shots, even when they weren't sitting near each other. This was less about reality, and more about narrative construction. The audience watching from home was meant to believe there was a natural bond, or natural competition, between the two. The irony, of course, is that Mariah and Jennifer were rarely photographed together. Unlike Madonna and Britney, who embraced the spectacle of shared publicity stunts, Carey and Lopez existed in carefully curated parallel tracks. But the absence itself was overlooked. Publicists made sure that whenever one released an album or a film, the other's name appeared in the same articles, creating the illusion of intertwined careers. By 2001, this illusion had hardened into truth. Even though no candid friendship moments ever surfaced, the press continued to sell the idea of diva sisterhood. It was a Hollywood mirage, glossy, convincing, and entirely manufactured. The illusion of camaraderie between Mariah Carey and Jennifer Lopez began to unravel as the early 2000s unfolded. On the surface, both women were still celebrated as global icons, but beneath the red carpet glamour, patterns of absence and subtle tensions painted a different picture. Fans who looked closely noticed that the so-called diva sisterhood existed more in headlines than in real life. The first sign of fracture came not from an offhand remark, but from music itself. In 2001, Mariah was working on her Glitter soundtrack. Central to the project was a song called Loverboy, originally built around a sample of Yellow Magic Orchestra's track Firecracker. At nearly the same time, Jennifer Lopez released I'm Real, which, as industry insiders whispered, used the very same Firecracker sample. The rumor mill quickly tied the switch to Tommy Mottola, Mariah's ex-husband and the powerful head of Sony Music. According to reports published in Entertainment Weekly in July 2001, Mottola allegedly redirected the sample to Lopez's team, leaving Carey scrambling to rework her track. What could have been a minor industry coincidence was instead seen as sabotage, deepening the perception of rivalry. Money and power played their roles as well. By the early 2000s, Mariah was one of the highest-earning female artists in the world, having signed an $80 million contract with Virgin Records in April 2001, a record-breaking deal at the time. Lopez, meanwhile, was diversifying her brand, commanding multi-million-dollar paychecks for films like The Wedding Planner, 2001, while simultaneously topping charts. The media loved to compare their earnings, framing Lopez as the newcomer threatening to destabilize Carey's empire. Whether intentional or not, the narrative pitted them against each other, reducing both women's artistry to a competition for supremacy. Patterns of absence also became telling. While other pop stars of the era engaged in collaborations, think Britney Spears and Madonna's infamous MTV moment or Christina Aguilera's duets, Mariah and Jennifer never shared a stage, a song, or even a candid red carpet exchange. Industry events were rife with opportunities, yet the two seemed carefully kept apart. Seating charts at awards shows rarely placed them together, and their press tours were strategically staggered. For fans, the absence itself became suspicious. If they were truly allies, why did their careers seem so meticulously unlinked? Social media wasn't yet the powerhouse it would become, but even in the late 2000s and early 2010s, silence spoke volumes. By then, Twitter and Instagram had become spaces where artists supported each other through likes, reposts, and birthday shout-outs. Carey frequently shared throwbacks of her collaborations with Whitney Houston or Boyz II Men, while Lopez celebrated her peers like Shakira or Pitbull. But when it came to each other, there was only void. Not a single tag, not a single mention. For younger fans growing up in the digital age, that silence became proof of a Cold War stretching over decades. Work ethic and creative style further highlighted the distance. Mariah was known as a studio perfectionist, layering vocals with painstaking detail, while Lopez built her career on choreography-heavy performances and cinematic spectacle. Their approaches weren't complementary. They were parallel, often used by critics to diminish one in favor of the other. Reviews from outlets like Rolling Stone and the New York Times in the early 2000s frequently drew comparisons, Carey as the voice, Lopez as the performer. Rather than celebrate both, the media's binary framing reinforced a subtle wedge. The cracks grew clearer in interviews. In 2002, during a German TV appearance, Carey was asked directly about Lopez. With a sly smile, she responded, "I don't know her." It was a four-word dismissal that spoke louder than any scandalous headline. For fans, it confirmed what had been whispered all along, that the friendship had never truly existed. Instead of camaraderie, there was indifference, and perhaps even disdain. By then, the narrative of two divas side by side had shifted into a narrative of two divas divided. Entertainment blogs dissected every move. Who sold more records in a given year? Whose film opened bigger at the box office? Whose tour grossed higher? Even as both women thrived, the conversation was less about their successes and more about how one supposedly eclipsed the other. Data anchors illustrate this shift. In 2001, Glitter underperformed, while Lopez's J.Lo album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 the same week. Her film The Wedding Planner topped the box office, a rare achievement reported by Billboard as a historic crossover moment. In contrast, Carey faced intense media scrutiny over her hospitalization for exhaustion and the collapse of her Virgin Records contract later that year. The optics were stark. Lopez ascendant, Carey embattled. To many, this wasn't just coincidence. It was evidence of the widening rift. By the early 2000s, the cracks were no longer rumors. They were patterns, visible in music, in interviews, in the silence of social media, and in the narratives crafted by a hungry press. The illusion of diva sisterhood had crumbled, replaced by something colder and far more intriguing. A feud whispered about in every corner of pop culture. If there was ever a moment when the illusion fully collapsed, it was 2001. Mariah Carey, once untouchable on the charts, was in the middle of a career storm. Her highly anticipated film and soundtrack Glitter had been plagued with delays, studio interference, and mounting pressure. During that year, she appeared fragile in public appearances, sparking media concern. Yet amid this turbulence, one remark managed to overshadow everything. 4 words that would become pop culture's most enduring soundbite. In a 2001 German television interview, Carey was asked about Jennifer Lopez. Her response was immediate, disarming, and unforgettable. "I don't know her." Delivered with a mix of indifference and irony, the statement traveled across the globe almost instantly. Tabloids ran it as front-page news, while late-night hosts joked about it for weeks. MTV replayed the clip endlessly, and Billboard reported that Carey's dismissal had set the internet on fire at a time when online fandom was just beginning to explode. Those 4 words crystallized the public perception. Whatever narrative of sisterhood the media had crafted was nothing but smoke. For Lopez, the timing was both flattering and fraught. She had just released her sophomore album J.Lo in January 2001, which debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. That same week, her film The Wedding Planner topped the U.S. box office, making her the first woman in history to hold both the #1 album and #1 film simultaneously. To fans, she was the industry's new golden girl. But Carey's icy remark reframed Lopez's rise not as celebration, but as competition. Headlines in the New York Post and People magazine reduced the story to one narrative: Carey versus Lopez, Queen versus Challenger. The situation escalated further with the Firecracker controversy. As later reported in Entertainment Weekly and Vibe, Lopez's single I'm Real had allegedly benefited from the same sample Carey had intended to use on her Loverboy track. The overlap was traced back to Tommy Mottola, Carey's ex-husband and the powerful head of Sony Music. Industry insiders claimed he deliberately handed the sample to Lopez's camp, forcing Carey to rework her single. Whether true or not, the story added fuel to the fire. Carey wasn't just brushing Lopez off with words. She had been undercut by industry politics tied to Lopez's rise. Fans took sides quickly. On message boards and early fan sites, debates raged. Was Carey the wrong diva, punished by her past relationship with Mottola? Or was Lopez simply capitalizing on opportunities given to her as an emerging star? The internet birthed two distinct hashtags before hashtags even existed: Team Mariah and Team J.Lo. What should have been two parallel careers became a battleground of loyalty. Lopez, for her part, played it diplomatically. In interviews, she avoided engaging in direct conflict, often praising Carey's talent while subtly deflecting questions about the feud. On Larry King Live in 2002, Lopez simply said, "She's a great singer. I've always admired her." The contrast was striking: Carey's cutting dismissal versus Lopez's graceful restraint. But to fans, Lopez's calm responses only made Carey's remark echo louder. The scandal lived a second life years later. In 2016, Carey appeared on Andy Cohen's Watch What Happens Live. When Cohen asked whether she still didn't know Lopez, Carey repeated with the same deadpan delivery, "I don't know her." The studio audience erupted in laughter, and the clip went viral, generating millions of views across YouTube and Twitter. A phrase uttered 15 years earlier had now become a meme, embraced by a new generation who saw it as the ultimate form of shade. Major outlets cemented its cultural weight. Rolling Stone called it one of the coldest dismissals in music history. The Guardian described it as a feud encapsulated in 4 words. Even the New York Times devoted column inches to analyzing how the remark had transcended gossip, entering the lexicon of pop culture. By then, "I don't know her" had become a shorthand for celebrity feuds, weaponized by fans across fandoms. The scandal also revealed how fragile the machinery of celebrity illusion could be. For years, the press had built a storyline of diva sisterhood, but one unscripted comment shattered it. Instead of glossy magazine covers, the public was now fed tabloid headlines like "Lopez vs. Carey, Diva Showdown," Daily News 2002. The friendship illusion, once sold as fact, had been obliterated by the sheer force of Carey's candor. By the mid-2010s, the narrative was cemented. Younger fans who hadn't lived through the early 2000s discovered the feud through YouTube, compilations, TikTok edits, and endless memes. The scandal had outlived its original moment, mutating into a cultural artifact. What began as a dismissive remark had transformed into a saga that defined both women's public personas in ways neither could have predicted. The mask had shattered in public. What remained was not the image of diva sisterhood, but the lasting spectacle of one of pop culture's most iconic feuds. In the aftermath of Mariah Carey's infamous dismissal, both artists faced diverging consequences, not only for their personal brands, but for the industries that relied on their images. Jennifer Lopez emerged relatively unscathed in the short term. By staying silent or answering diplomatically, she cultivated an image of professionalism. In a 2002 interview with Larry King, Lopez smiled politely when asked about Carey, saying only, "She's a great singer. I've always admired her." That restraint reinforced Lopez's reputation as the calm, composed star who refused to take the bait. For her fans, it was proof of maturity. For skeptics, it was a clever PR strategy that allowed her to avoid being drawn into a feud she could never win outright. Mariah Carey, meanwhile, walked a more complicated path. Her "I don't know her" remark became legendary, but in the early 2000s, she was simultaneously dealing with one of the lowest points of her career. The Glitter soundtrack and film had underperformed. Her deal with Virgin Records collapsed in 2002, and headlines focused more on her exhaustion and hospitalization than on her artistry. For critics, the feud with Lopez was framed not as playful shade, but as bitterness from a star whose throne was under threat. The press relished the narrative, Mariah, the fading diva, lashing out at the newcomer. And yet, the remark's afterlife reshaped Carey's public image in unexpected ways. Over the years, "I don't know her" became a pop culture staple, a phrase quoted in countless memes, GIFs, and late-night comedy routines. What had once been criticized as arrogance was reframed by younger fans as iconic shade. By the 2010s, Carey was hailed as a queen of wit, someone who could dismiss an entire narrative with 4 words. The line became less about rivalry with Lopez, and more about Carey's brand as the ultimate diva. For Lopez, the shadow of the feud lingered. Though she never retaliated, journalists kept circling back to the subject. During press tours for American Idol in 2011, when she joined as a judge after Carey had left her own judging stint, interviewers again poked at the rivalry. In 2016, when Carey doubled down on "I don't know her" on Andy Cohen's Watch What Happens Live, Lopez was asked for her thoughts. She simply laughed it off, saying she had no issue. Her strategy remained the same: never escalate. But the very fact that she had to keep addressing the remark years later showed how deeply it had stuck in public memory. The absence of collaboration also became its own consequence. While fans witnessed powerhouse duets like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey's "When You Believe" 1998, or Beyoncé and Shakira's "Beautiful Liar" 2007, the idea of a Carey-Lopez collaboration was unthinkable. Their silence was deafening. When Mariah launched her Charm Bracelet Tour in 2003 and Lopez began her Dance Again World Tour in 2012, the industry noted the missed opportunity. 2 queens of different strengths, voice and performance, never sharing a stage. The feud itself had become a barrier to creative possibility. The impact extended to broader cultural commentary. Think pieces in outlets like Rolling Stone and Vulture examined why the industry thrived on manufacturing rivalries between women. Why was there always room for only one queen at a time? Why did the press frame Lopez's success as Carey's decline, rather than celebrating both? The feud, real or exaggerated, became a case study in how media exploits competition to fuel headlines. Data anchors emphasize this legacy. In 2011, Lopez topped Forbes's list of the world's most powerful celebrities, driven by endorsements, film, and music. In 2012, Carey signed on to American Idol for a reported $18 million, then the highest salary ever for a reality show judge. Both remained at the top of their games, yet every article about their success still found space to reference the feud. In 2015, Billboard ran a feature titled "The Mariah Carey and Jennifer Lopez Feud Explained," proving that the story refused to die, even more than a decade later. For the franchises surrounding them, the effects were just as clear. American Idol, which had Lopez as a beloved judge in the early 2010s, brought Carey on board in 2012, inviting speculation that Fox had deliberately played into the feud narrative. Tabloids covered their every move on the show, even though they were never on the panel at the same time. The absence itself became a selling point. By the late 2010s, it was clear. The feud had become larger than either woman's career. For Carey, it reinforced her image as the unapologetic diva who could turn shade into cultural gold. For Lopez, it cemented her as the graceful professional who stayed above the noise. And for Hollywood, it was proof of how a single remark could define decades of coverage. The absence became a character of its own, an invisible wall between two icons, forever shaping how the world remembered them. Looking back now, the so-called friendship between Mariah Carey and Jennifer Lopez reveals more about Hollywood's machinery than about either woman's true feelings. The feud, whether genuine, exaggerated, or somewhere in between, left behind a cultural footprint that reshaped how audiences read celebrity relationships. At its core, the saga demonstrated how the industry packages intimacy. In the late 1990s, publicists and magazines crafted the illusion of diva sisterhood, not because Carey and Lopez were actually close, but because the story sold. Two glamorous women of color at the height of pop dominance made for an irresistible narrative of empowerment. Yet when that narrative cracked, the fallout was even more profitable. Tabloids and networks learned quickly that rivalry headlines generated more clicks and more sales than friendship ever could. The "I don't know" her moment became the clearest symbol of this shift. What might have been a throwaway line turned into one of the most quoted phrases in music history. By 2016, The Guardian described it as a pop culture meme that outlived its feud. On Twitter and TikTok, the phrase was repurposed countless times, used not only to shade celebrities, but to dismiss ex-friends, co-workers, or even politicians. Mariah's remark transcended its original context. It became part of internet language itself. That's a legacy few celebrity feuds can claim. For Lopez, the legacy was subtler, but equally enduring. Her refusal to escalate reinforced the image of the calm, composed professional. Critics might argue she sidestepped confrontation, but fans celebrated her restraint as strength. In an era when women in entertainment were often framed as catty or jealous, Lopez's decision not to engage publicly helped her brand evolve into something larger, an all-around entertainer who rose above the noise. The silence itself became part of her mythology. Culturally, the feud illuminated how audiences were becoming more media literate. By the 2010s, fans were increasingly skeptical of the best friends forever narratives pushed by glossy magazines. They could spot the seams of fabrication. Articles in Vulture and Rolling Stone began questioning why women in music were constantly pitted against each other. Carey versus Lopez, Britney versus Christina, Katy versus Taylor. Instead of blindly consuming the rivalry, fans debated its construction, asking, who benefits when the press pits women against each other? The double legacy, then, is one of both entertainment and education. On one hand, the feud gave pop culture one of its most iconic catchphrases, a shorthand for shade that continues to thrive decades later. On the other, it offered audiences a case study in how the entertainment industry manipulates relationships for profit. It forced fans to recognize that what they see, smiles on red carpets, friendly mentions in interviews, may be less about genuine connection and more about narrative engineering. Data anchors highlight this cultural endurance. In 2020, TikTok, videos tagged with "I don't know her" amassed millions of views, proving that a remark from 2001 still resonated nearly 2 decades later. That same year, Billboard ran yet another explainer piece revisiting the feud for Gen Z audiences. And in 2022, when Lopez headlined the Super Bowl halftime show, and Carey re-emerged with her perennial holiday hit, "All I Want for Christmas Is," social media users once again invoked the feud, joking about whether the two would ever acknowledge each other publicly. The fact that the question persists shows the lasting power of the myth. In the end, the friendship that never was became more influential than a genuine bond might have been. A duet could have topped charts for a season. Instead, the feud created a cultural script that has endured for decades. Hollywood sold the illusion of intimacy, then sold the spectacle of its collapse. Fans bought both, and that raises a larger question. In celebrity culture, when we see two stars laugh together on stage or pose arm in arm on the red carpet, are we witnessing friendship or just another performance? With Carey and Lopez, the answer remains elusive. But the legacy is clear. Even the absence of friendship can leave an indelible mark on pop culture. So what do we make of it all? For decades, fans were sold the image of diva sisterhood, only to see it shattered by four unforgettable words. Mariah Carey and Jennifer Lopez never shared the stage, never exchanged public affection, and yet their friendship became one of the most dissected narratives in pop history. Perhaps that's the irony. The absence itself became the story. But what about you? Do you believe Mariah and J.Lo were ever truly friends? Or was the illusion always more powerful than reality? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this debate respectful. Don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow pop culture detectives, and subscribe to Secrets Behind the Fame for more untold stories of Hollywood's most complicated relationships. Because in Hollywood, even silence speaks volumes. And sometimes, a single sentence, "I don't know her," can echo for decades.